Brexit was the withdrawal of the United Kingdom, UK, from the European Union, EU. Following a referendum on June 23, 2016, Brexit officially took place at 2300 hours o'clock GMT on January 31, 2020, midnight February 1, 2020 set. The UK is the only sovereign country to have left the EU. The UK had been a member state of the EU or its predecessor, the European Communities, EC, since January 1, 1973. Following Brexit, EU law and the Court of Justice of the European Union no longer have primacy over British laws. The European Union, Withdrawal, Act 2018 retains relevant EU law as domestic law, which the UK can amend or repeal. The EU and its institutions developed gradually after their establishment. Throughout the period of British membership, Eurosceptic groups had existed, opposing aspects of the EU and its predecessors. Labour Prime Minister Harold Wilson's pro-EC government held a referendum on continued EC membership in 1975, in which 67.2% of those voting chose to stay within the bloc. Despite growing political opposition to further European integration aimed at ever closer union between 1975 and 2016, notably from Margaret Thatcher in the late 1980s and 1990s, and factions of the Conservative Party in the 2000s, no further referendums on the issue were held. By the 2010s, the growing popularity of UK Independence Party, UKIP, as well as pressure from Eurosceptics in the Conservative Party, persuaded then Prime Minister David Cameron to promise a referendum on British membership of the EU if his government was re-elected. Following the general election in 2015, which produced a small but unexpected overall majority for the governing Conservative Party, the promised referendum on continued EU membership was held on June 23, 2016. Notable supporters of the Remain campaign included Cameron, future Prime Ministers Theresa May and Liz Truss, and former Prime Ministers John Major, Tony Blair, and Gordon Brown, while notable supporters of the Leave campaign included future Prime Ministers Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. The electorate voted to leave the EU with a 51.9% share of the vote, with all regions of England and Wales except London voting in favour of Brexit, and Scotland and Northern Ireland voting against. The result led to Cameron's sudden resignation, his replacement by then Home Secretary Theresa May, and 4 years of negotiations with the EU on the terms of departure and on future relations, completed under a Boris Johnson government, with government control remaining with the Conservative Party during this period. The negotiation process was both politically challenging and deeply divisive within the UK, leading to 2 snap elections in 2017 and 2019. One deal was overwhelmingly rejected by the UK Parliament, causing great uncertainty and leading to postponement of the withdrawal date to avoid a no-deal Brexit. The UK left the EU on January 31, 2020 after a withdrawal deal was passed by Parliament, but continued to participate in many EU institutions, including the Single Market and Customs Union, during an 11-month transition period in order to ensure frictionless trade until all details of the post-Brexit relationship were agreed and implemented. Trade deal negotiations continued within days of the scheduled end of the transition period, and the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement was signed on December 30, 2020. The effects of Brexit are in part determined by the Cooperation Agreement, which provisionally applied from January 1, 2021, until it formally came into force on May 1, 2021. Brexit, one of the most significant geopolitical events in recent European history, marks the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union. Stemming from a divisive 2016 referendum, its journey has been punctuated by leadership turnovers and multifaceted reintegration hurdles, reshaping the political and economic landscape of the region. Brexit refers to the UK's decision to leave the European Union, EU, which was officially completed on January 31, 2020. The name Brexit is a combination of British and exit. On June 23, 2016, a referendum saw 52% of participating British voters choosing to depart from the EU. This marked a historical move as the UK was the first nation to make this decision. The following years were dominated by intricate negotiations regarding the exit terms. After Britain formally indicated its intention to leave in March 2017, then Prime Minister Theresa May undertook the task of navigating these discussions. However, May's tenure faced challenges as she struggled to secure Parliament's endorsement for her negotiated deal with the EU, leading to her resignation in July 2019. It was under Boris Johnson, her successor, that Brexit was finally realised. In 2013, British Prime Minister David Cameron, facing increasing Eurosceptic sentiments within the Conservative Party, committed to holding a referendum to decide the UK's EU membership status. Prior to the 2015 surge in immigration due to instability in the Middle East and Africa, many UK citizens were already concerned about the number of migrants arriving from other EU countries, facilitated by the EU's open border policies. The United Kingdom Independence Party, under Nigel Farage's leadership, capitalised on these anti-immigration feelings, resulting in significant electoral gains, primarily at the Conservatives' expense. Additionally, the financial burdens from the EU's handling of the Eurozone debt crisis and the Greek bailout, 2009 to 2012, heightened concerns about the loss of British sovereignty and dissatisfaction with extensive EU regulations affecting consumers, businesses, and environmental practices. The Labour and Liberal Democratic parties were predominantly pro-EU, and some Conservatives, including Cameron, were supportive of staying in the EU, contingent upon securing certain reforms from the UK's 27 EU partners. Following the Conservatives' victory in the 2015 UK general election, Cameron, honouring his pledge, proceeded with plans for an EU membership referendum, aiming to achieve beforehand certain EU concessions to address the grievances of those leaning towards leaving. In February 2016, the European Council agreed to several of Cameron's demands, including a temporary ability for the UK to limit benefits for new migrant workers and exemptions from the EU's aspirations for closer integration, while allowing the UK to keep the pound sterling and providing compensation for Eurozone bailout contributions. Cameron set the referendum for June 2016, leading the Remain campaign alongside Britain Stronger in Europe, emphasising the benefits of the EU single market. The Leave campaign, spearheaded by former London Mayor Boris Johnson, a potential rival for the Conservative leadership, centred on Vote Leave. Johnson criticised the EU's evolution since Britain's 1973 accession, arguing it hindered the UK's ability to negotiate favourable trade deals. Both camps made dire predictions about the adverse effects of their opponent's victory, supported by expert opinions, studies, and celebrity endorsements ranging from influential political figures to renowned actors and sports personalities. On the referendum's eve, polls indicated a tight race. However, 52% of voters ultimately chose to leave the EU. Cameron, advocating for a smooth transition, announced his resignation, stating his belief that he should not be the one to lead the country through the forthcoming changes. Despite initial expectations of Boris Johnson's ascendancy, Theresa May emerged as the Conservative Party's new leader and assumed the role of Prime Minister in July 2016. Even though May had originally been against Brexit, she committed to fulfilling its mandate upon taking office. On March 29, 2017, she took a definitive step forward by officially triggering Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty through a 6-page correspondence addressed to European Council President Donald Tusk. This act set off a 2-year period dedicated to hashing out the UK's departure terms with the EU. In her letter, May expressed a desire to approach the negotiations with a spirit of constructive, respectful, and sincere cooperation, expressing optimism for securing a bold and ambitious free trade agreement by the end of the discussions. In pursuit of a clear mandate for her Brexit strategy, May unexpectedly called for a June 2017 Parliament election. However, rather than reinforcing her stance, the Conservative Party lost its House of Commons majority and had to rely on support from Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party, DUP. This outcome complicated May's goals, as there remained significant differences within the Conservative Party concerning the specifics and broader aspects of the Brexit proposal. In July, a prolonged cabinet session at Chequers, the Prime Minister's countryside residence, seemed to produce a unified stance on Brexit. The consensus document endorsed sustained alignment with EU guidelines and proposed a shared framework for UK-EU agreements. While it underscored the UK's authority over immigration, it also proposed a structure allowing UK and EU citizens to work and study reciprocally. Though initially it appeared May's softer stance focusing on preserving EU economic ties prevailed, the unity was short-lived. Both David Davis, the chief Brexit negotiator, and Foreign Secretary Johnson resigned, citing concerns about the proposal's concessions and direction. By November, EU leaders officially accepted the withdrawal terms encapsulated in the Chequers Plan, which May believed resonated with British aspirations and paved the way for the UK's bright future. The arrangement stipulated that the UK would pay around $50 billion to the EU to meet its long-standing financial commitments. Although the UK's EU exit was slated for March 29, 2019, the agreement required the UK to follow EU rules at least until December 2020, allowing for extended discussions about the future EU-UK relationship. The withdrawal agreement is a legally binding treaty between the United Kingdom, UK, and the European Union, EU, that sets out the terms of the UK's exit from the EU. It was negotiated over a period of time following the UK's decision to leave the EU, as expressed in a 2016 referendum. The agreement addresses various aspects of the UK's departure, including: it protects the rights of over 3 million EU citizens living in the UK and around 1 million UK nationals living in EU countries. This ensures their right to reside, work, and access social security benefits, among other things. Often termed the Divorce Bill, this involves a series of financial commitments the UK agreed to honour, which includes contributions to the EU budget and other liabilities. The agreement established a transition, or implementation, period that lasted until December 31, 2020. During this time, EU law continued to apply in the UK, allowing businesses and governments time to adjust to the new post-Brexit environment. One of the most contentious issues was the matter of the border between Northern Ireland, a part of the UK, and the Republic of Ireland, an EU member state. To avoid a hard border, provisions were made that would keep Northern Ireland aligned to some EU rules, unless and until an alternative solution was found. The agreement slated for a House of Commons debate in December faced fierce opposition from various parties, including the Conservatives. Growing momentum for a fresh Brexit referendum emerged, but May firmly dismissed the notion, emphasizing the public had already voiced its decision. Many detractors took issue with the Northern Ireland backstop plan, aimed at upholding the Good Friday Agreement by ensuring an unobstructed border between Northern Ireland and the EU's Ireland. Should the UK and the EU fail to finalise an agreement by December 2020, this plan proposed a binding customs protocol between the EU and Northern Ireland. Critics argued this could inadvertently craft a customs barrier in the Irish Sea, leading to regulatory disparities between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. In early December, the full legal counsel from Attorney General Geoffrey Cox on the Brexit agreement was disclosed. Cox highlighted that, without a UK-EU consensus, the backstop's conditions could perpetually persist, with the UK legally bound and requiring EU consent for termination. As the House of Commons engaged in a 5-day discussion leading up to a scheduled vote on December 11, May, anticipating a potential defeat, halted the debate and deferred the vote. She aimed to extract further EU backstop reassurances. In response, the opposition hinted at a confidence vote and a potential early election. Yet, a more direct challenge emerged when a staunch Brexit faction within her own party questioned May's leadership. However, with 200 MP support, May remained leader, safeguarded from further leadership challenges for a year. Brexit's prolonged uncertainty increasingly became the focal point of British politics. Given that views on May's Brexit strategy and Brexit itself were divergent and traversed party lines, both major parties faced internal turmoil. Seeking reinforced parliamentary backing for her modified Brexit blueprint, May procured renewed commitments from EU leaders concerning the backstop plan. The parties agreed on a legal mechanism allowing Britain to raise a formal dispute if the EU sought to bind the UK indefinitely to the backstop. A subsequent statement aimed at replacing the backstop by December 2020. May also unilaterally emphasized the UK's right to abandon the backstop if discussions with the EU stagnated. Although Attorney General Cox acknowledged that these additions somewhat mitigated the risks, he also noted that the fundamental legal standing of the agreement remained unchanged. The Liberal Democrats were the most vocal among the major UK parties in opposing Brexit. After the UK left the EU, they maintained that they would fight for the closest possible relationship with the EU and didn't rule out campaigning to rejoin in the future, depending on the circumstances. The SNP opposed Brexit and has indicated that an independent Scotland might seek to rejoin the EU. They view EU membership as being in Scotland's best interests. The Labour Party, under the leadership of Keir Starmer by 2022, had shifted its stance from Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. Starmer had expressed his aim to improve ties with the EU but stopped short of committing to a campaign to rejoin. The priority was more on a closer relationship rather than rejoining. The party, under Boris Johnson's leadership, was responsible for finalizing the Brexit process. There was no intention or desire within the mainstream of the party to rejoin the EU. Brexit, the withdrawal of the United Kingdom from the European Union, has had notable impacts on the EU economy. While the direct implications on the UK economy have been substantial, the repercussions within the EU have also been significant. The departure of a prominent member state like the UK from the EU's economic framework altered the dynamics of the single market and led to adjustments in trade, commerce, and financial interactions. The UK was not only a major contributor to the EU budget but also a significant market for many EU member states, and its exit resulted in changes in supply chains, trade regulations, and investment patterns. The EU faced disruptions in trade flows due to the new trade barriers and customs checks introduced between the UK and the EU. Industries relying on just-in-time manufacturing and those deeply integrated with the UK market encountered challenges, leading to supply chain disruptions and increased costs. Sectors such as fisheries and agriculture experienced changes due to altered trade agreements. The departure of a financial hub like London had an impact on the EU's financial landscape. While some financial activities shifted to EU cities, the fragmentation of financial services between the UK and the EU impacted the efficiency and ease of conducting cross-border financial operations. The full extent of Brexit's impact on the EU economy is still evolving as new trade agreements are established and market adjustments continue to unfold, with both positive and negative consequences for various sectors and economies within the European Union. Brexit, the UK's decision to leave the European Union, brought about a host of challenges in its aftermath. Here are 10 significant subsequent challenges that arose. The transition period's end saw disruptions in trade between the UK and EU, with new customs checks and paperwork causing delays, especially at major ports like Dover. Ensuring no hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland led to the creation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. However, this has caused tensions, with checks on goods moving between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. UK-based financial services firms lost their passporting rights, which allowed them to sell their services across the EU without needing separate authorizations. The status and rights of UK citizens living in the EU, and vice versa, became a significant issue. While many of these concerns were addressed in the withdrawal agreement, there remained individual complications and uncertainties. While the UK regained control over its waters, there were disputes over fishing rights, quotas, and access to EU vessels, causing tensions, especially with France. The end of freedom of movement between the UK and the EU affected industries reliant on EU labour, such as agriculture, healthcare, and hospitality. The UK needed to ensure its data protection standards were adequate by EU standards to continue data flows between the entities. The UK decided not to continue participation in the Erasmus student exchange program, which impacted students' opportunities to study abroad. Professionals faced challenges as qualifications earned in the UK were no longer automatically recognised in the EU and vice versa. Beyond the tangible, the UK's decision to leave the EU brought about diplomatic challenges, with the need to redefine its relationship with the EU and its member states, and potential implications for the unity of the UK, especially concerning Scotland and Northern Ireland. Brexit stands as one of the most consequential and debated political events in recent European history. Stemming from a deeply divisive referendum, it not only showcased the complexities of leadership and decision-making in the modern age but also underscored the multifaceted challenges of reintegration post-separation. The UK's journey from casting a monumental vote to navigating its aftermath is emblematic of the ever-evolving dynamics of global politics, serving as a testament to the intricate interplay between national sovereignty and regional cooperation. As nations worldwide watch and learn, Brexit remains a pivotal lesson on the implications of political change and the resilience required to navigate its repercussions. Various factors motivated the UK's move towards Brexit, including concerns about sovereignty, immigration, economic regulations, and perceptions of the EU's influence over British affairs. Brexit is the shorthand term for British exit from the European Union. Essentially, it means the UK decided to leave the EU and operate independently of its policies and structures. Thank you for watching this video.